The forecast that was already alarming just got worse. What meteorologists were calling a significant severe weather event for Monday has upgraded, and the outbreak that has already killed people, destroyed homes, and carved tornado paths across 4 states since Thursday is not finished. It is escalating. Right now, as you are watching this, a major severe weather system is bearing down on the central Mississippi Valley and lower Ohio Valley with a level 4 out of 5 risk, the second highest threat level the Storm Prediction Center issues. And forecasters are warning that when the atmosphere loads to its peak tonight, supercells capable of producing EF3 or stronger tornadoes could be tracking across communities that include major population centers in Missouri, Indiana, and Kentucky. This is the worst turn of what has already been one of the most violent spring severe weather stretches in years. To understand why the forecast got worse, you have to understand what happened over the weekend, because the weekend storms did something important that the forecast models are now incorporating. The multi-day outbreak that began Thursday with the EF4 tornado in Enid, Oklahoma, continued through Saturday night, when 2 tornadoes dropped out of supercells over North Texas with consequences that are still being assessed. An EF2 tornado with peak winds of 135 miles per hour touched down in Runaway Bay in Wise County, northwest of Fort Worth. A double-wide manufactured home was thrown 100 yards from its foundation. 2 single-wide manufactured homes were completely destroyed. 1 person died in that residence. In Parker County near Springtown, a second tornado confirmed at EF1 intensity remained on the ground for nearly 10 miles. A second person died. At least 20 families were displaced from their homes. The thunderstorm system that produced both tornadoes also knocked out power to nearly 40,000 North Texans and sent golf ball-sized hail through roofs, vehicles, and windows across Arlington, Duncanville, and Fort Worth. By Sunday, more than 50 tornado reports had been recorded since Thursday, and particularly dangerous situation tornado warnings had been issued Sunday evening, a designation in the National Weather Service reserves for situations where conditions are favorable for violent, long-track tornadoes with extended time on the ground. PDS warnings are not routine. They are issued when the atmospheric environment is not just favorable, but specifically aligned for the kind of tornadoes that cause the most damage and carry the highest risk of casualties. The fact that Sunday evening produced PDS warnings means the atmosphere was already primed at a level that meteorologists treat with a degree of caution they reserve for the most dangerous events. Now comes Monday. In addition to the level 4 of 5 risk, a level 3 of 5 risk for severe thunderstorms is in place Monday from parts of the middle Mississippi Valley into the lower Ohio Valley. The storm system is expected to develop in 2 phases. The first phase begins Monday afternoon, when the cold front and dry line converge across the southern plains, and new supercells fire in the warm sector ahead of the front. When new storms roar to life Monday afternoon, they could become supercells capable of producing a few potentially intense EF3 or stronger tornadoes and hail bigger than baseballs. The second phase develops through the evening and overnight hours as the line of storms evolves and pushes eastward into the Mississippi Valley. During this phase, the primary threat shifts toward widespread damaging winds, though tornado risk does not fully disappear. A tornado watch is expected to be issued for the area covering Monday night, with numerous severe thunderstorms likely, bringing the threat of damaging winds, tornadoes, and large hail. What makes Monday's setup particularly concerning is the phrase meteorologists use when they say it depends on how Sunday's storms unfold. Forecasters say the intensity of Monday's severe storms will depend on how Sunday's storms unfold. If the storms are not as widespread across the plains, more moisture and instability may stream into the lower Mississippi Valley, potentially supporting a higher-end severe weather event on Monday. This conditional amplification is one of the more technically challenging aspects of forecasting major outbreaks. The atmosphere is a connected system, and the storms on Sunday can either consume or preserve the energy and moisture that Monday's storms need to reach their potential. If Sunday's activity remains limited, Monday inherits an atmosphere that has been charging for days without significant discharge, and that scenario produces the highest end outcomes. The cities in Monday's primary threat corridor carry tens of millions of people. St. Louis sits in what the Fox Forecast Center has identified as one of the areas of greatest potential impact. Evansville, Indiana, is under a direct threat, with local meteorologists there issuing their most urgent language about the overnight period. The lower Ohio Valley corridor, which runs through parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, and adjacent states. Asdevelops sits within the level 3 risk area, where tornado rotation is confirmed as possible with the strongest storms. These are not rural areas. These are metropolitan communities, where a significant tornado during the nighttime hours, when people are asleep, when visibility is 0, when the instinctive alarm is not a darkening sky but a phone or a siren, represents a qualitatively different level of danger than the same storm during daylight hours. The nighttime tornado risk is the factor that elevates Monday's threat beyond what the forecast numbers alone convey. Research on tornado fatalities consistently shows that nighttime tornadoes are disproportionately deadly, relative to daytime events of the same intensity. The reasons are straightforward. People cannot see a dark funnel against a dark sky. The visual cues that help daytime observers identify an approaching tornado, the greenish-yellow sky, the rotating wall cloud, the visible condensation funnel, are absent or severely reduced at night. Warnings that arrive on a phone or through a siren in the early morning hours reach people in the most vulnerable states, asleep, disoriented, uncertain about the location of their shelter. The advice to have multiple ways to receive warnings is specifically significant for overnight events like Mondays, because the passive alert, the phone notification that arrives without a person actively seeking information, is what connects many households to the warning system during the hours when they are most at risk. The broader context of this outbreak within the 2026 severe weather season is important for understanding why meteorologists are treating Monday with the level of urgency they are. Based on the 1991-2020 average, about 182 tornadoes occur in the United States in April. The 2026 April count was already running well above that average before Monday's system arrived. The season opened with a March EF5, the first confirmed in the United States since 2013, and has maintained an above-average pace of significant tornado events through every subsequent week. The April 13th-14 outbreak produced 39 confirmed tornadoes, including an EF3 in Wisconsin. The April 17th-18 outbreak confirmed 80 tornadoes in a single day, the largest outbreak of the year. The Enid EF4 on April 23rd, the deadly North Texas EF2 on April 25th, the PDS warnings on Sunday, April 26th, and now the level 4 risk on Monday, April 27th. Each event has been distinct in its geography and its mechanics. Together, they form a pattern that places 2026 firmly in the category of meteorologically active spring seasons. The flooding dimension of Monday's threat is also getting worse, not better. The same system bringing severe thunderstorm risk is also bringing heavy rainfall to a region that is already carrying significant soil saturation from repeated storm events. The first wave of thunderstorms still had plenty of power left in them Monday morning and were prompting severe thunderstorm, tornado, and even flash flood warnings. Flooding reports were popping up across Kansas City before sunrise, as well as in Topeka, Kansas. Flash flooding is the most statistically deadly weather phenomenon in the United States on an annual basis. More Americans die from flash flooding each year than from tornadoes. And the combination of already saturated ground with additional heavy rainfall from Monday's system means that flood watches and warnings are expanding across a corridor that overlaps with the tornado threat area. People moving to tornado shelter need to also be aware of flood risk in low-lying areas and stream valleys that can fill rapidly in heavy rain events. For the people who live in the threat zone tonight, the practical guidance is consistent and specific. Know before the storm arrives where your shelter location is. Interior rooms on the lowest floor of a structurally sound building provide the best protection from tornado wind loads. Avoid windows. Avoid mobile homes and vehicles, which offer no meaningful protection from significant tornado winds and should be abandoned well in advance of any warning for a sturdier building. Have multiple ways to receive alerts. A weather radio, a phone with wireless emergency alerts enabled, and awareness of local siren systems. When a tornado warning is issued for your specific location, move to shelter immediately. The overnight timing of Monday's peak threat means that those decisions may need to be made in the dark from a state of sleep, with minutes rather than the extended lead times that daytime setups sometimes provide. The 2026 severe weather season has already demonstrated that it will not follow a predictable script. The March EF5 was historically early. The April 17th-18 80 tornado outbreak was historically large. The Enid EF4 produced an outcome, 0 fatalities, that reflects both effective warning and community preparedness in a city that had reason to be ready. The North Texas weekend storms proved the season's capacity to turn deadly in communities that did not escape the pattern. And Monday's level 4 system, developing tonight across the Mississippi Valley and lower Ohio Valley, is the latest escalation in a spring that has refused to ease. The threat just took a worse turn. The question now is whether the warning systems, the preparedness, and the decisions made by millions of people in its path will be enough to absorb what is coming. The science behind why this particular outbreak has been able to sustain itself across so many days is worth understanding, because it reflects a specific atmospheric pattern that meteorologists have been watching develop since the beginning of the week. The upper-level trough of low pressure that has been positioned over the western United States has been slow to move eastward, slower than typical spring storm systems that push through the plains in a day or two before exiting into the Great Lakes in the northeast. When an upper-level trough moves slowly, it continues to draw warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico northward into the plains and Mississippi Valley for an extended period. The boundary between that warm, moist Gulf air and the cooler, drier air to the north and west the front and the dry line, remains in place and continues to serve as the focus for daily storm development rather than pushing through quickly and ending the threat. This slow-moving pattern is the reason the outbreak has stretched from Thursday through the weekend and into Monday, with each day producing a new round of storm development along the same general boundary. The ingredients, moisture, instability, wind shear, and a forcing mechanism, have been replenished rather than exhausted because the atmospheric pattern has not changed fundamentally since the first storms developed on Thursday evening. Meteorologists call this a high-amplitude pattern, referring to the large north-south swings in the jet stream that allow both very warm air to penetrate far northward and very cold air to drop far southward simultaneously. High-amplitude patterns are associated with persistent, severe weather outbreaks because they maintain the temperature and moisture contrasts that energize storm systems for multiple consecutive days. The particularly dangerous situation designation that was issued Sunday evening deserves specific attention because it marks a threshold that the National Weather Service applies conservatively. A PDS tornado watch is issued when forecasters assess that conditions support not just tornadoes, but violent long-track tornadoes, those rated EF3, EF4, or EF5, affecting a broad area over an extended period. The criteria for a PDS watch include an environment with strong and deep wind shear through the atmosphere, high instability values, and adequate low-level moisture to sustain supercell organization over time. When all three of those criteria are met simultaneously at levels that exceed typical tornado watch environments, the PDS designation signals to emergency managers and the public that the probability of the most severe outcomes is elevated relative to a standard watch situation. Sunday's PDS watches covered parts of the outbreak corridor as the system was still developing. Monday's setup is being analyzed against those same criteria. The human dimension of this outbreak, the 2 people killed in North Texas, the 40 homes damaged in Enid, the 20 families displaced from Runaway Bay and Springtown, the dozens of water rescues in the Great Lakes region from flooding earlier in the week, is the context that numbers and forecast categories can obscure. Each of those statistics represents a household, a family, a decision made in the seconds before a storm arrived or the hours after one passed. The Springtown resident who described losing her carport, her chicken coop, her shed roof, and 2 mature trees while she and her 4 dogs sheltered in the middle of her house, that account of a person doing exactly what the emergency management guidance says to do, inside a structure, away from windows, waiting for the storm to pass, is the ground-level reality of what severe weather outbreaks mean in practice. The infrastructure consequences extend well beyond the immediate damage. Vance Air Force Base in Oklahoma, struck by the massive stovepipe tornado on April 23rd, announced it would remain closed until further notice as crews worked to restore power and water systems. A military installation being operationally shut down by a tornado is not a common event.